Yes, you probably all know the URL, cascadiapoeticslab.org, founded in 1993. And we keep going. They'll find a way to stop us someday, but so far they haven't. The organization exists at the intersection of poetics and bioregionalism. And we've picked three readers that are some of our favorites of all the poets we've connected to in the last 28 years. And they each bring something unique to the art of poetry and to the connection with place. And I'll let them demonstrate that tonight. And I'm going to read the bios that were on the blog post and not do the Cadillac version that Matt Treese would or Adelia McWilliam would. I feel so. I know, Matt, you're laughing, but you guys are like experts at that, and that's not my skill, but maybe someday. So the order tonight is going to be Robert Lashley, and then Teresa Whitehill, and then Fred Wahl. And there will be Q&A after, and maybe we had a good discussion about the interview that I did with Fred Waugh in our workshop last night. I do want to point out that we're on the ancestral homeland of the Duwamish tribe, and other coastal Salish tribes are from here. We do pay real rent to the Duwamish tribe, so not just saying we recognize the presence of being on the ancestral homeland of this tribe and other tribes, but actually paying the Duwamish tribe rent to help them get the federal recognition that they had for a moment and that was taken away from them. And of course, a town like Seattle, named after Chief Seattle, ought to have the local tribe recognized. So that's something that needs to be fixed. I do want to talk a little bit about Imbolc, and I'm going to share the screen for a moment. I put together this Imbolc sort of a writing prompt or ritual. It's called Imbolc Rededication with Fire, Water, Tigers, and Yosemite Sam. And I'll drop this the link to this in the chat. And my Sunday night workshop folks got that last night, and I'll read a little bit about it because it talks about Imbolc and, of course, Lunar New Year, both of which I believe are tomorrow. Michael McClure told me that he once that he did little rituals for himself, about which he told no one. I assumed it was a soul-building activity, which he believed poetry could be. A line from his author's preface to 3 poems says, "If poetry and science cannot change one's life, they're meaningless." This has resonated with me since 1995. So much poetry today lacks the duende. The poem is a gift, and poetry is part of the gift economy. That's been known for centuries, but many forget it in the fog of reductive materialism and focus on career goals. This might be a good time to revisit Larry Dossey's brilliant essay, which is linked there. From Witch's Almanac, Imbolc, observed February 2nd, Wiccans celebrate a variation of Imbolc as one of 4 fire festivals, which make up half of the 8 holidays or sabbats of the Wheel of the Year. Imbolc's defined as a cross-quarter day, midway between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. The precise astrological midpoint of the northern hemisphere is when the sun reaches 15 degrees of Aquarius. Among Dianic Wiccans, Imbolc, also known as Candlemas, is the traditional time for initiations. Among reclaiming style Wiccans, Imbolc is considered a traditional time for rededication and pledges for the coming year. And of course, this year is the year of the tiger. And the year of the rat, 2020, was about survival. That's right, we all survived so far the plague. The year of the ox, my year, I'm a metal ox, 2021, was about anchoring ourselves in a new reality. The year of the tiger will be about making big changes. This will be a year of risk-taking and adventure. We're finding enthusiasm again, both for ourselves and for others. Everyone's fired up, generosity is at an all-time high, and social progress feels possible again. So excited to be initiating the Year of the Tiger with this reading. First up is Robert Lashley, a 2016 Jack Straw Fellow, an Artist Trust Fellow, a Stranger Genius Award nominee. His rich mind and wounded soul blaze in glory like never before, says one critic. His third book, Green River Valley, was published by Blue Cactus Press in his hometown of Tacoma. which makes it a homecoming of sorts, though he lives in Bellingham, Washington. And you can hear an interview with him that I did as a podcast on Cascadian Prophets podcast, or you can hear him read his work right now. Robert, a real pleasure to have you here tonight. Thanks for agreeing to be part of this, and break a line.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you who are watching via Zoom. I am very grateful to be here. I'm very grateful to be on this dais with these readers. First, a few short words. The most underrated thing about the gorgeous mosaic of literature is that it's sturdy. From the members of the Harlem Renaissance that survived the religious moralist of their time, to the Allen Ginsberg that endured Yankee tribunals who wanted to censor his book. The best of our literature and the best of our writers have endured long after temperance chic movements have come and gone. In short, the work has stuck. I believe we are at a reckoning in this country, in this world, where we need what sticks, what is real, and we are going to need it more. By focusing on the elemental as universal but not monolithic, Splab, Paul, and all of you have given a base for people who want to take the aesthetics of this region seriously and something that will endure any reckoning to come, because I believe there will be a reckoning. And just keep working and just keep doing what you do. I'm gonna read about 3 poems. This first poem is called Miss McDaniels Tends Her Winter Beats as the Block Gets Too Hot. On the 1st, the winter sprouts announce themselves in colors of brown and blue, in simulacrum altars for OG's communion suits, defrosted memorials for iced out cousins and various traces of crystal, a new life and faith in the mass of detritus in the ends and beginnings of January. The day designs itself in frail rises. Light abets the shades of doughboys who travel past blossoms of stems of rock pipes. Light contrasts with the cop car's crocodile wail as it passes over block after block. Light hits brown faces on tracks and commotions that intersect and intersect. On the 1st, winter sprouts are an underground windmill. Seeds from red clay reimagine the past and protect from tribes in recall. This next poem I'm going to read is called Steampunk Junkyard Artist Sonata. At the junkyard, elegy is abstract. A teamster's sign swings above arboretum glass on a copper nail. With the ice wind, project sightings leak nation meeting rooms and rib shacks. With the ice wind, trap houses and trap shops come together. Car doors and sinks move through prop window panes, constellations on the gravel. Mattresses upon fence sides jump with toy plastics and bed bugs that scurry away. Around the limbo of renewal, the winter wind is a metaphor. To define here is to be vast, to be finite in heft, to be a god, arbitrary, yet lonely, yet common under a shiny new mask. An ice gust, nature demands to create new cannons, to see new variations as the wheel upon the wheel, the mother of metaphor, the black tarnished stone where dry bones get up walking all natural. The direction forward when all directions are gone, the turn without a gaze at what's leveled. My last poem that I will read for you is called, here, let me find it. Sorry about that. I am Storefront Preacher Man's Last Testament, 11th in Commerce. What is a camel to a needle in the deflocked eye? What is a needle to a bottle in artisanal streets that adapt hard to the resignations of winter? Its binaries of color mask and accompany, but defy invisible ice pews. At his sermon on the frost, wandering tribes lose their patience. Kindreds who cannot wait in frozen altars move past his reheated text of Sodom, move past the stretching of his blue-black hand for something to carry him, for a ladder to roll with the fallen sky, for a golden stair to bless his sacrifice of a dream-colored boy and his nature. Unions and successions dissipate in his death story, yet salt does not freeze. Stones do not raise up. Blades he called the rolling arch of his sacrifice reappear as metaphors in his tongues. Reappear as the continents of dead lambs on city buses that vanish when their black smoke is gone. That vanish with the harbor lights, in the harbor lights breaking as city light stops their constellations. As last turtle doves below the old lamps make their wobbly transit south. Winter birds and buzzards, infirmed in age, make their wobbly transit south. The last standing deacon could not find his wings, so he lowered his hands in the snow. I thank you all very much.
Oh, Robert, so fantastic. So good to hear you read always. The chat room is filled with lines from your work, and now they're going nuts. Seeds from red clay reimagine the past. To be a god, arbitrary but lonely. When dry bones get up, walking all natural. Oh, I was reminded of the ice weir that Susan Point did on the Duwamish River there behind one of the Boeing buildings. Well worth seeing if you haven't seen that. It was evocative of that. You're tapped in, Robert. Thanks for your kind words, man. All right, that was short. Sing short is what they said at the Taos Poetry Circus, and Robert gave us his gifts and split. Well, he's still here. A California poet, letterpress printer, and graphic designer extraordinaire, a world-class graphic designer. If you have not seen the cover of Cascadian Zen, hunt that up on the website and see a bit of the magic that she makes. Teresa Whitehill served as poet laureate for the Northern California city of Ukiah from 2009 to 2011, also informed us that Ukiah is haiku backwards, which I never knew until that was pointed out. Her interrelated focus on literary and graphic arts came out of her study of book arts at Mills College in the early 80s. Since 1984, she's lived in Mendocino County, where she's well known to local poetry audiences. Her collections include A Grammar of Longing, A Natural History of Mill Towns, and Saudades, as well as the anthology Deep Valley Poets Laureate of Ukiah 2001 to 2018, published by Slow Mountain Press in 2017. She spends her time between her studios in Ukiah and St. Helena, California, managing her commercial graphic design business, Colored Horse Studios. I got to know her when she helped organize a reading for me when I went to visit and interview Mary Norbert Cordy. It seems like it was 10 years ago, but I think it's only been 2 years. And it's just a delight to know this woman, to know this poet, to know her work. And I'm really grateful that she's reading tonight. Please welcome Teresa Whitehill.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, it was 2019. when you came to Mendocino County. That was my introduction. So I got introduced to Cascadia Poetics Lab via Paul's American Prophets Project. So he came to interview Mary Norbert Corte, who's one of our county treasures. And I looked him up, I looked Paul's work up, and I thought, oh my God, this guy's got some stuff going on. I should have him read for us. So I arranged a local reading for him, and things progressed. I visited Seattle in 2020, and while I was there, I met Jason. And you know, one of the important things for me about Cascadia Poetics Lab is its emphasis not only on poetics, but on bioregionalism. So after the 2016 election, I felt like I really needed to up my game if I was gonna hope to help my community survive what was going on. And I got involved with a festival called the Geography of Hope. It's located in Marin County. And they had taken their inspiration from Wallace Stegner's essay, in which he said that the lands of the West, he envisioned them being a geography of hope. And that really knitted together my sense of poetics and land. So for me, the Cascadia Poetics Lab is living proof of that magic and that energy and that power. And I feel like it's going to help us make the next step forward. So in honor of Imbolc tonight, I read up a little bit and saw that it's a time of dedicated to divination and blessings and healing. So my first couple of poems were inspired. I selected inspired by that. A wish or a prayer. I would go from this world. I would step into others, where the sequence of my actions is laid out directly in front of me, where sorrow does not hide her dress from me or her story. This is called The Loveliness of Mistakes. What do you do, Felicia, when you've spent 2 days printing something and then realize it's all wrong and there is no making it right? You suck it up. You order new paper. You start over. And what do you do with a history of mistakes, but see that they clear an uncanny path to those things that are most important to you? Those things at the heart of science and culture, the reliquaries of creativity. Because each in their own way is unforeseen. A really good mistake should be something that involves venturing into new territory. And the fear of the mistake is probably akin to the fear of the ending of life. You dread going down the short, predictable path. You prevaricate. You pet the cat. But you know something now that you didn't know before. You have a resilience, a keen drive to make something beautiful. A keen drive to make something beautiful, even as beauty recedes. You hold in your hand a partial treasure map, a symptom. The world and its resources and pleasures and aches is your home. You can no longer be denied. No matter how much love you find wanting, you exist in your own skin with a thought that is not quite realized and a passion to articulate the heart of such puzzles. It was this that my classmates ridiculed in grammar school. And the one mistake I may have made at that time was to try so very hard for so many years afterward to watch what I said. Those glorious antiquarian phrases that would come into my mind and out of my mouth. Those things my cousins seemed to delight in, and that sometimes later must have brought her grief. I was impulsive and blurted out things that weren't helpful. And only gradually did I realize that they belonged to and were nourished by and touched the dream world, as well as something older. So, this partial journey, you might complete it. There's no guarantee. You will map the energy of the gods to the little you have been able to pin down. And you will be proud of your energy and your love, your energies and your loves, your lovely energy, your proud love, your willingness to mingle in the halls of the dead, bringing the dead treasures that cause their eyes to light up, putting smiles back on faces that have lost flesh. You will speak to birds. Thank you. So I got myself involved in Cascadia Poetics Lab during my visit in 2020. Hearing about this anthology that Paul and Jason were putting together. I remember on my last morning in Seattle, sitting having a coffee at a little community garden, I told Paul that I would typeset the book. And here we go. So I'm going to read my poem that is a contribution to Cascadian Zen, and it's called California Milagro. By the fig and by the olive. Thus begins a prayer from the Quran. It goes on to praise the closest mountaintop. In this case, a saw-toothed ridge rearing back so slowly, we walk its precipitous edge, blinking, and are gone. By the fig and by the olive, Surat Atim. And under the ragged rocks, we imagine angels in the stone faces so that we can look at them without blushing. We fashion wings for them out of manzanita and pennyroyal so that we can enter their arms, the arms of the mountain, with complete abandon. We invoke the olive and the fig. We wake in the middle of the night, looking through the window to the next world, lit from inside the throat of the coyote. A world that intersects ours only in the shadow of stone pillars, in the splash of a fountain, in the water we take so carelessly into our throats. And this is the picnic. The trail that brings you up the mountain will bring you down again. And if you let it, if you have the appetite or know where to find it, it can lead you to other paths that intersect alleys, musical with gravel and the back doors of jazz clubs. Formal roads paved with the guts of prehistoric lovers. These surfaces can take you all the way to the town of Whitehorse in the Klondike region near the border of Canada and Alaska, and all the way back again to Isla Santa Ynez in the Chilean Tierra del Fuego, past the city where people sleep on beds of salt, past the milagros of the skylines, the chapels of commerce. This is your picnic blanket, your Americas. You can take it up, gingerly lifting each corner of the tattered twin continent, Newfoundland, Argentina, the Aleutian Islands, shaking out the crumbles, then flicking it out, poof, and laying it back down again. It looks like an old favorite t-shirt, long since spattered with battery acid. Now it becomes a beloved quilt on which to dream, a stage over which creatures rove and stumble and flatten themselves into tar pits. Where 30,000 years ago, lovers who wore amulets of bone and shell settled along waterways, harvesting the fertility of the stars, where airplanes hover and buzz, bestowing and removing fragmentary bits of consciousness. Clouds rise and falter and dissolve, fires race back and forth, rockets take off, bombs explode. Mountains shift their weight from one hip to the other. Dandelion flowers plump and swell and burst under the pressure of water and its claiming. From here, the banana shape of California is a perfect fit for the sleepy torso. And the artful depression that is the Napa Valley can be spanned by two fingers pressed against the ground in the classic symbol of peace. A place any Mediterranean refugee recognizes instantly and with appetite. It is a perfect mimicry of home. California is saudades. It is the tragic blood which underlies its colonial history. It is the miracle of memory reconstituted, a fertile soil and a climate of grace and ambition. It is transparent, adaptive, alchemical. Surat, Atin, Sutra, deep prayer of life. Diva of the rock music scene bending over in her damp skirt with her fault zone visible. Politician of the industrial waterways, the Venice of the internet. Spend your lonely buttons here. This is the domain of Queen Calafia, legendary ruler of a race of Black women who thrived in a paradise that brought us the mystic John Muir, inspired the poetry of Black Bart, master thief and social critic. Prayer, deep sister of the soul, open up our appetites. Place our hands under your skirt. Let this picnic nourish, enhance the dream life. Prayer, deep prayer of tides, rancheria of sun-baked feet stamping the dust. Oh, thou enwrapped one, rise up a little. Show me the rush hour traffic of the forgotten. Lend me your rhythm so that I can sing, and in singing, rise. Prayer, deep prayer of grotto and of delicious fruit. Order up for us this one rambunctious twilight so that we may continue through the evening. Then, and only then, take and feed on us if you must. But let us feel the buckling of the day under its load of blossoms, the margin of the soul etched, squandered. Let us feel the edges of things, of continents, the cool of the garden fragrant, and its birth, and the eternal center, the heart of stone, the gift of time in its aspect, water. Thank you.
Fantastic, Teresa, fantastic. So good to hear that poem. What a rich blend of personal mythology and spirituality. And I think The History of Mistakes could be the title of my autobiography. I'm not sure. You know, when you were talking about Felicia or read the poem, I could feel the passion in, I don't know if you were reacting to just having a dry throat or the emotion of what she has gone through with the loss of her press, all of that, which I've of course read about, and maybe we can talk about at the end of the reading. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Thank you.
I feel for you, and I look forward to seeing you and to meeting Felicia. And I know someone very close to me who's interested in learning about letterpress printing. The rabbit queen over here. All right, so thanks,
Hi,
Teresa.
Boston.
I got to get the light on her better. There we go. Need another light over here. All right, that was Teresa Whitehill from Ukiah, California, far out. Final reader tonight already. Fred Wahl lives in Vancouver in the West Kootenays. He was Canada's Parliamentary Poet Laureate from 2011 to 2013 and made an Officer of the Order of Canada in 2013. His award-winning poetry, fiction, and nonfiction books include Sentenced to Light, collaborations with visual artists, Is a Door, a series of poems about hybridity, Music at the Heart of Thinking, his wonderful serial poem, which we discussed in our interview, and Scree, the collected earlier poems. Definitely a doorstopper. It's a thick, beautiful book, which you should have in your collection. It was published by Talon Books in 2015. We did an interview that was a recent podcast. We talked mostly about the simple, with a page stretching out from my feet, and talking about his study with Robert Creeley and Charles Olson and Robert Duncan. And in the workshop last night, they said, he just seems to be in the right place at the right time, studying with all these gifted people. Well, like attracts like, and we're grateful to have this master poet in our house tonight, in our Zoom room. Please welcome Fred Wahl.
Thanks very much, Paul. Yeah, not so much in the right place in the right time. I'm just old. Those are all old poets. So I happened to run into them when I was younger. But anyway, I want to just thank Paul for inviting me to be part of this reading and supporting Cascadia Poetics Lab. And I'd like to thank Paul for his, the incredible work. He's very busy, this guy. He's really doing all kinds of stuff. And mostly I'm interested in what he's doing around innovative poetry and poetics. And I was so pleased to be in through my Kootenai compatriot Linda Crossfield. She clued me into the fact that Paul had arranged this bi-weekly reading of Nate Mackey's Double Trio. And so we met a number of times last summer and fall, just in a really joyful kind of just reading the long poem. And it was such a great, quieting, but exciting experience. It's the attention to what this really clued me into the fact that what's going on here is an attention to what matters, and how we write and live. It seems to be at the center of the crux of what Cascadia provides. Now, Cascadia is just an idea, right? It's and being from the Kootenays, we're kind of a little on the edge of what some people think of Cascadia. Linda will feel with this for me too. We see it out on the West Coast, and we're all in the West, but it's the whole idea of Cascadia as that. As I think someone mentioned, I think maybe Teresa mentioned before, it was part of this geopoetic scene going on. And I just want to say that I studied with Charles Olson, and he opined once that I don't know where it was, either in a class or in a book, that the idea is to be perfect. So that's sort of what Cascadia Poetics Lab is trying to move towards. So I'm going to read, in terms of place, I'm going to read from a book, Scree. It's collected in Scree, but it's from an old book called From In Here. Or not, the book isn't called From In Here, but the poem is. Writing has a lot to do with place, the spiritual and spatial localities of the writer. I see things from where I am, my viewpoint, and I measure and imagine a world from there. Oaxaca, Vancouver, the Kootenai River, 1,000 years ago or today, my father's birthplace became local to me and compound to make up a picture of a world I am native of. Writing is sometimes remembering this image, and sometimes it has to make it up. Malcolm Lowry says he thinks of himself as a great explorer who has discovered some extraordinary land, but the name of the land is hell. It is not Mexico, of course, but in the heart. Writers are wanderers and wanderers. The American poet Ed Dorn reminds us that the stranger in town is interesting because he at least knows where he has come from and where he is going. Writing is sometimes useful that way, with news of the world out there, but out there is only meaningful in its correspondence to in here. I live in the interior of British Columbia, and such a qualification affects my particular sense of what the world looks like. We go down to the coast, which is the exterior, and outside, the city. The spaces between here and there are part of a vast similarity. The towns become predictable in their activities and appearances. Castlegar and Prince George, though specifically themselves, share certain aspects of distance, color, and taste. One feels at home nearly anywhere there are rivers, pulp mills, trucks, the mysterious gravel roads further inward, and similar local inhabitants. Down and out there, the exterior becomes more. Vancouver leads to other cities and countries, etc. But all of it out there is measured from in here. In the particularity of a place, the writer finds revealed the correspondences of a whole world. So that the whole sense of the Cascadia Poetics Lab is being, aimed, for me at least, some of the things that I'm interested in is that it's aimed at place. And I want to read a piece from this recent book, Beholden, which is a project that I was involved with a group of artists from Emily Carr University, and Rita Wong, another poet who worked on this project. She and I wrote a poem as long as the river, or actually two poems, but the book is I don't know if you can see this, but it's the poem's written on both sides of the river. Every once in a while, we run into a bridge or a dam and we cross over and change sides. But it's a poem that we wrote over a couple of years, and we traveled up and down the river. And so this is something that we share. Linda and I are both from the Kootenai Columbia watershed, and we've lived on those two rivers most of our lives. And we're very happy that we share this river with our southern neighbors. And right now they're working on the Columbia River Treaty, which was set up in 1964 and which has to be renegotiated. Hopefully there's going to be, with Trumper out of the way, we can maybe get some good negotiation done. Anyway, one of the things that happened at the Columbia River, that on the Columbia River, is that both the US and Canada got involved with building dams. So the river is actually a series of reservoirs. And one of the disastrous things that's happened, many disastrous things have happened along the river, but one is in our neighborhood up near Castlegar. The Arrow Lakes was devastated, and the communities along the Arrow Lakes were devastated by this putting in a dam and flooding the whole valley and kicking about 500 people out of the valley, and it was horrible. So this is a section from that part of the river. Someone's village has become mud lake. Bull trouts waiting for some silt-free water. How are you, Blue Camas? shaken in the dust, just call the wetland back. Find a river you can trust. Where are you, duckweed? You can't grow here anymore. The sloughs are gone, the birds have disappeared, sang goodbye to the cottonwood snow. The shore is sad and silent. Many dreams drowned in this reservoir. Using water this way is violent. What's happened to the kokanee? The spawning channels flooded. Now the river's just a mirror of how our greed's cold-blooded. These arrow lakes filled up and up and killed the estuaries of the creeks, flooded fields of grass and drowned the orchards, submerged ancestral Sinaixt graves. Those people in the way declared extinct. It's true. Oatscott swamp, old family farms, old game trails, just a memory silted now and dried to dust at drawdown. Shelter Bay, no shelter after all. This valley could be filled with love. Oh, lonely animal eyes at Caribou Point, blown up for a new road. So sing the blues. To be this river washed in misery, loss, and sadness, not breathing deep, just silent nights alone. How much you'll miss the touch of salmon red and sedgegrass edge, the churning of the minto up to Arrowhead, and then the burning too. Yeah, ain't this dam messed up your plan to keep this spirit flowing with respect? Will the riparian ever be repaired? Will the salmon ever return? As the river taught us nothing, when will we ever learn? So it's a kind of it's a very important river, I think, to all of us in the Northwest, and important in many, many ways. And we're trying in the States right now, a lot of the native tribes are trying to get back, bring back the salmon. So there's an awful lot, there's a great push, a great effort to get the acknowledgement that the salmon were destroyed by many of these dams, and we're trying to get that back. I'm going to read. Don't want to take us too long here. I'm going to read a section, a couple of sections from a recent poem that has to do with the Northwest because it uses Chinook Wawa, Chinook jargon, and so this piece is called "By and By." Elki Nasaika Wawa Wegged Bimbi, J. Paul says. Soon we will talk again, by and by, maybe in a little while. But behind this, I was younger. I understand now half as much. Then wait, that was long ago. The more we cut through, the less we change. Already my death is my own. Time not yet verbed, understood to be natural. Eventually, I will know this elastic forest. So you say, some time ago, even next week, I will understand the numbers and the location, and I'll go there in the story alongside the river, by and by. If it's indicative, maybe we will go in my boat. Before noon, I was younger. Now I feel strong, just another older brother. Spelling has never had anything to do with it, or has it? There are rules which may not be easy to comprehend. Also, keep it simple. Row, row. If it's a canoe, remember all that talk about northern waters? Glass, that time was glass. Paddle your own North Atlantic turbine. There was dirt, there was the earth. Deep time lurks. Ocean then was further. Just a post office surrounded by interior Lake Salish. I thought of it as leaning. The theory of rain bends. My bardo is post-mortem, postmodern. Another bad trip. Almost a festival, a regular Chacamaika coming to you or at you. Good to be home again, ain't it? But in the by time, coming round. It's a poem in 3 sections. I'll just read the 3rd section, which is a prose poem called Two Places at Once. Marion Penner Bancroft says, when Osprey arrived in April, the geese were in the water and shitting all over the beach. To be expected, the sticks and moss of last year's nest on the piling had been mostly kicked away by the brants using it for their spring hatch. But now, getting ready for their own spring breeding, the 2 raptors were confused about which partially ruined nest to rebuild. last year's, or on a nearby piling, the one from 2 years ago. The notion of an unformed time through which habit can be read backwards relies on the transfiguring capacity of the mind. Something equal also poses the question, what's next? Osprey cannot but double up and bring new sticks and moss to both old nests. But there is a timing problem that then gets codified by intention. 2 nests at once, an impossible stratagem for building and raising a couple of chicks before it's time to leave in September. Biding the time between the pilings of design and our recurring hills of sleep, all of us along the lakeshore, the birds and fish, the backhoes, the ferry and the ambulance, keep in mind the puncta of power lines and telephone poles, the horizon and the moons. This little while is experienced as location and memory, a gift, not a clock. Caught between 2 nests, Osprey is betwixt, and in the by and by, not oblivious to the wind talking, tugging, gathering, and releasing. In this between place, we can all witness the accumulation of presents, the braiding of seeds. The hours are not equal, the horses, the barn, etc., nor the nests. The 2 delays the one, the once. Circle over the lake, float slowly round and round, hover, turning, turning, by and by, by and by, by and by. And I'm gonna finish with just a short piece from a book called Diamond Grill, which is it's a fairly old biofiction or biotext, and it's about growing up in Nelson, and I'm in my father's Chinese Canadian restaurant. I'm part Chinese, so in our family we celebrate the Lunar New Year and or try to. It's pretty hard to do that this time around again. But one of the things that our family always had for Chinese New Year's was juk. Juk is a kind of a congee made from turkey stock, and it was like our family, one of our family dishes. So this is a short piece called "Juk is a soup we always have after New Year's because it's made with leftover turkey." I think of it as the bridge between our white Christmas, presents and turkey stuffing, and our Chinese New Year, firecrackers and juk. As far as I know, all of the Wahl families have it, and each is distinctive. Auntie Ethel's is pretty good, but my mom still makes my dad's version once in a while, though neither she nor Ethel add that little shot of rye whiskey he said was the secret to a really good juk. I couldn't taste liquor, but boy, his soup was the best, a real treat. But he also used the little red dates, which I'd pick aside. They're too much of a contrast, a little too sweet for the full-bodied ricey broth. And Ethel says you don't really need them. But if you want to try them, get a package of small red pitted dates at the Chinese supermarket. Also, buy only the smallest packet of chung toy, salted turnip, since you only need a couple of pieces. For the phu juk, dried bean curds, you'll have to decide between flat sheets or ropes. I prefer the ropes because they're chewier. Soak the whole package of juk overnight. Be sure to wash the chung toy. It's heavily salted. Peel and slice a few fresh water chestnuts. Optional is a bit of the dark seaweed and a few soaked Chinese mushrooms. Put all this with a couple of cups of rice into the turkey stock. You should have about 6 to 8 cups of liquid, and cook slowly for an hour or so until the rice is overdone. If not very much of the turkey made it this far and you feel the need for some meat, you can add a bit of sliced pork steak. In the end, you should have a thickish gruel, almost a congee. Juk is even better than bird's nest soup, though both soups share an intrinsic proprioceptive synapse, memory. While slurping a bowl of juk with the January snow still swirling outside, the memory of the bird itself, only a few weeks old, triangulates with a smoky star-filled night in China. Likewise, with the gelatinous bird's nest soup, the taste carries images of men climbing the walls of dark caves in Yunnan, collecting the spaghetti-like translucent strands of birds' nests, the frightened cries of the swallows themselves, as piercing as a foreign language. So thank you very much.
Fred, you're the only guy in the world who put the words juk and proprioception in the same poem. Oh my God. Again, the quotes, using water this way is violent, isn't it? Someday those dams will be down and the fish will get to run again and things will be closer to the way they ought to be.
Yeah, we can hope. We can hope.
I hope that. The osprey here make their nest in the cell phone tower behind the Safeway. So they're here May through September, and the coots aren't when the osprey are in town.
Right.
They know. Brilliant reading. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The concept of and thank you for your kind comments about Cascadia Poetics Lab. I'm grateful you're associated with this work. We talked a little bit about proprioception in the workshop, and I encouraged the workshop participants to ask you questions about it, but I'm just going to ask you about proprioception. You bring it up in that poem again. It's a really not a very well understood kind of concept, but the notion of where your body is in space. Tell us about your relationship with this word and this concept and what it means to you.
Well, it's been all around me. I first read about it through an essay by Charles Olson on proprioception. But once I got stung in the eye by a hornet, and I had an anaphylactic shock. And to make a long story short, I was rushed to the hospital, and the nurse, I was convulsing. And then the nurse came out to the gurney and just put her hands on my body and said, go with it. Just go with it.
Keep breathing.
And just keep breathing. And I just calmed down. I stopped convulsing. And the next day I asked the nurse, I said, what did you do? What was that all about? That was wonderful. And she said, well, that's proprioception. We learned that in nursing school. Proprioception is it's our insides, if you like. My image of it is that it's part of our skin, except it's our interior skin. So if you could put your hand down your throat, right down to the inside, and sort of pull it all out, it'd just be your skin. So it's just the continuation of yourself inside.
We're not going to encourage folks here at the workshop to try that tonight or at the reading to try that tonight. We'll try that for another time. I was going to say don't do this at home, but everybody's at home anyway. I use that line. Brilliant. I'd like to open it up to other questions from folks. You can probably just unmute yourself and pipe in if you have a question for Robert or Teresa or Fred. Feel free to. Anybody there? I will wait for someone to pop in, but in the meantime, I'll ask Teresa a little bit about the Book Arts Mendocino, or BAM for short.
So Paul referenced my friend Felicia, who I mentioned in my poem. Felicia Rice is a letterpress printer, designer, artist, publisher. And in 2020, she had been living in Santa Cruz for 4 decades. And in 2020, her entire studio and home were burned up in the Santa Cruz mountain fires. And it took everything. It melted her presses, and it, incinerated everything she had. She and her husband walked away with just the clothes on their backs. And big tragic loss for culture. It burned up 4 decades of fine press publishing. So she moved back to Mendocino County, where she grew up, and moved into her family home that had been left to her by her parents. So long story short, I was one of the people who showed up to welcome her to the community. And we got involved with another letterpress printer and were invited to do an exhibit in Mendocino, which is going on right now. And as part of that, we thought, well, why not see if some of the other businesses and organizations want to do similar exhibits at the same time. And we created this whole idea of Book Arts Mendocino, or BAM for short. And so right now we're in the middle of a 2-month book arts festival on the Mendocino coast. And there's about, I don't know, 30 or 50 different exhibits, talks, tours, demos, things like that going on. So Paul and Bhakti are going to be joining us a week from Saturday for the second Saturday reception. I'm looking forward very much to having them, to meet my friends, my family, and see what we're up to here in Mendocino County.
We are so looking forward to it. Road trip. Thanks for all your efforts in putting that together. We're very excited about it. And to see the book arts, just it's like being in a candy store. Shauna, do you have your hand up to ask a question?
I do. I'm so taken by just the beautiful images, and for particularly Fred and Teresa's, some of your work is so long. I can't quite wrap my head around how somebody keeps it going for that length of time and have it to be so interesting with, you know, location and like dreamy images and scientific facts, and I'm just stunned kind of. And how long do you guys like work on a poem of that length? And how do you do you research? I mean, how do you kind of do it?
Teresa?
I'll jump in, and then I'd love to hear what Fred has to say. So, you know, one of the bonuses of getting involved with Cascadia Poetics Lab is I've been introduced to like a whole new realm of poets from outside my area. And some of us have been meeting on a sporadic basis and sharing poems with each other. And one of the things that a common denominator seems to be that we are involved in writing longer pieces. And so we often talk about that, like what that's about. And there's a poet here in Mendocino County who's actually from way northern Ontario. He just happens to be living this part of his life in Mendocino, Bill Brad. And he's one of my teachers, my mentors. And he talks about the breath, the long breath. And that, you know, when you write in a rhythm that goes with your breathing. And I think, you know, Walt Whitman certainly showed this as well. And if you think about an American poet who is quintessential American, of course, Walt Whitman, and what do you have when you have his poems? You have these long lines. And so for me, who often compose poems out loud while I'm walking, there's something about the rhythm of the breath that seems to want longer lines. And in answer to your question about like how long does it take to write such a piece, I do a lot of journal writing. And when I'm working on a poem, I will often hand write out the entire poem, even if I have composed it or done initial work on a keyboard. And that was a trick taught to me by Diane DePrima, because she told me that, you know, if you're ever having trouble like figuring out how a poem ends or something, your brain knows how it ends and your hand knows your brain. So just write out the poem and your hand will write the end of the poem for you. You know, if you just relax and let it do its work. So that's my 3 cents. Fred?
Well, I come to poetry from music, and I played jazz trumpet when I was young, and I was interested in when I got into poetry. I was interested in carrying on that notion of improvisation, of the ad lib, of something, of, you know, toking up enough breath to kind of just go forever if you could. But very influenced by someone like Miles Davis, for example. But I think in poetry, one of the things that I've gotten into, or I got into many, many years ago, was the long poem. And the long poem was, at least in Canada, and I know it went on in the States too, and for many writers, but it was a big thing in the 70s and 80s to get into these long poems, mostly out of a notion of resisting the ending, resisting closure. So it was kind of that sense of trying to keep the language afloat and not end it. And one Canadian poet, Robert Croce, he likened it to a kind of sexual foreplay and entrance, he called it. So kind of that resistance to closure, not wanting it to end. If you can, one of the problems I think many of us have with quote unquote normative lyric poetry is that it's as nice as it might be, or as interesting as it might be, it has what another poet friend of mine, Tom Wayman, calls an ominously predictable ending.
Wow.
So sometimes the poem comes in right in the first few lines and just, particularly when there are a lot of pronouns involved, or a couple of pronouns, I, you, you know where it's going to go. And just knowing where it's going to go kind of let the poem lose its energy. So I like that sense of not knowing what's going to happen next, and hopefully it'll just keep going, and there's going to be all kinds of things happening next.
So Croce would have a tantric poetics then, basically.
I guess.
Robert Lashley, tell us about the research that goes into your work.
It's a very good question. A lot of it, isn't. It depends on the poem. I think that, like, I try to when I have an image or a scene or a structure, I try to go through three things. Am I the person who needs to be writing this? Am I writing this the best that I can? And will I not waste a person's time in writing it? And I always try to see and edit and try to try to see the subtext in whatever scene that whatever poem that's coming out, and so in short, it depends on the poem. It depends on the context of the poem. Like some of the stuff I know by heart, but some of it, like I try to study and get terminology and words right. It all depends on the context of the poem.
Beautiful. Thanks, Robert.
Robert, you had something very perceptive to say about Fred's work. You said you use the cadences of the Old Testament so unostentatiously and effectively. Could you talk a little bit about that? That was really lovely.
Thank you very much. What I was impressed, what I heard in a lot of Fred's work, it is kind of the way that you flip the kind of you use Old Testament cadences but not Old Testament rhetoric, and it creates a sort of a fresh way for me, for my eyes and reading you and hearing you now. It's a fresh way of looking at Keats's negative capability. There's a delicious tension there, and it's saying something without saying it. And I'm very appreciative. Oh, damn, Diana. Oh, I think you might be muted.
You're muted, Diana.
Oh, the basics. Can't get enough of the basics. Anyway, you have this long poem in this book called The Ode to the Commencement Muralist. And I was reminded in Fred's poem that said by and by, that used that. I was wondering if you'd talk about this poem, because it goes on. It's probably your longest in this book, right? It's 5 pages.
Yes, it is.
It's quite a meditation, quite a walk.
I thank you for asking that question, Diana. It was inspired 3 years ago. Like some of my students caught heat from social media because a scammer activist had accused them of using graffiti and spraying businesses, and they used our practice space, the picture of the practice space at the art center that I used to teach at. And a scammer activist had accused my students of being of spraying businesses using the picture of their practice space and lying on my students to make himself look good. And it was a real big controversy, and like it kind of turned into like the First Amendment rights of, instead of people focusing on this person that lied about my students, it became a First Amendment right of the art of the muralist and the taggers in my it became a kind of like, we don't like your kids' art, you should leave. So I wrote that long poem as an elegy and as a defense of the art and a champion and a defense of the artist and their right to see the world as they see fit, and their right to see this neighborhood as they see fit. And in the way that they alchemize history in ways that are more complex than our binaries allow. But I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's a poem. I mean, it deserves, it gets better with each reading. Either that or my brain gets better with each reading, but.
Thank you very much.
A little of each, I think. You know, when Fred mentioned Alki, or he said, he didn't pronounce it like that, but I pronounce it like that because there's a neighborhood in Seattle called Alki, and that's the state of Washington motto, by and by. Fred, I don't know if you know that, but it was interesting to hear that come up. You know, seeing that Alki is where people go on a 90-degree day here, because there's a beach there and a view of the Olympic Mountains, and quite a neighborhood. Although it's changed, used to be nice little shacks along the waterfront, and now those are all torn down in condos. You know something about condos living in Vancouver, so I won't go too far down that road. We're already over an hour into it, and so I just want to see if there maybe would be one last question. If you have it, blurt it out. If you don't, that's okay too. We're going to take this the recording of this brilliant reading and put it online. So grateful to Fred Wahl and Teresa Whitehill and Robert Lashley. So great to just take a little bit of your fire and associate it with the Cascadia Poetics Lab. All 3 of you have worked in Cascadian Zen, so it is my fervent hope that we'll be able to meet in the next. We're talking about publishing Cascadian Zen maybe as early as April next year. That's the current plan. So that's subject to change, but it would be wonderful to see you all at the same event and have a drink, have a drink with you. So thank you for being part of
Here,
this.
here. Thanks
you
so
all.
much for inviting me. Thanks.
Also, Paul, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Thank you. It was an honor to read with you both, Fred and Teresa. And Paul, I'm looking forward to buying your new book.
Thanks, Robert.
Plugging the book. Yes.
Thanks for-
You forgot to plug the book, Paul.
No, it's poor form, but you know, I'll take it. And the fact that Bill Turner's painting is on the cover and he died less than a month ago is a really poignant thing. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all supporters of the Cascadia Poetics Lab. Carlton, thank you for your contribution during this reading. I noticed that and I'm grateful for it. I thank the board of directors. I believe almost all the board members were here, so thank you for helping make this happen. My workshop participants, thank you. And we will, I don't know what our next event is going to be. There will be more interviews. And of course, we've got Poetry Postcard Fest coming up in July. So poetrypostcardfest.org, the website for more of that. Thank you all.
Paul, can I just say something?
Sure.
I just want to apologize for being 13 minutes late. The old growth tree protesters were blocking the Trans-Canada Highway.
Well,
Yeah,
I hope you haven't run into the problems that they've been running into in Ottawa, and we won't get into those
no, these were good protesters.
Okay, good.
Yeah, they were lying on the highway
I see.
quietly.
All right. we
No,
can't
no
do-
Nazi signs.
we can- Thanks, Ann.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Robert.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Teresa and Robert.
Yeah.
Take care.